Ever wondered why some people just seem to, well, rocket up the career ladder, while others, maybe just as talented, kind of get stuck?
Hmm?
You've probably heard that old saying, right? Just work hard, perform well, and you'll get ahead.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the standard advice.
It is. It's this belief we all seem to have that, sheer merit guarantees success. But what if what if it's a beautiful myth?
A misleading one, yeah.
What if the real path to influence, to actually advancing in your career is, it's a lot more complex, maybe even counterintuitive, and involves this force we rarely talk about openly.
It's so true. And, the advice you get from people already at the top, it often kind of puts a spin on how they got there.
Right.
They focus on what should have worked,
Mm-hmm.
the ideal path, not necessarily the unvarnished truth of what actually did work for them.
It's not about being cynical, is it?
No, not at all. It's more about taking an honest look at the real politic of how people interact in organizations, the human element.
Exactly. So our mission today is to cut through some of that noise. We're going to unpack why just doing a good job isn't always enough, and figure out what actually works in the organizational world to gain influence. We're digging into some really profound insights from the book Power. And, we think you'll discover why getting a handle on these dynamics isn't just useful. It's pretty much an essential organizational survival skill.
Absolutely essential.
So the big questions are, what are the true paths to power? And why does the conventional wisdom get it so wrong so often? Let's dive in.
Okay. So we should probably start with what might be the most surprising truth, really, which is that performance on its own just isn't enough.
Right. That's the core belief we need to challenge first.
Yeah. So many people fundamentally believe that just excelling at your job is, the direct route to the top. But like you said, leaders giving advice often gloss over the actual power plays they used.
And the evidence for this, when you look at real-world examples, it's kind of striking, isn't it?
It really is.
Take Rudy Crew. Remember him? Miami-Dade County School Superintendent. His performance was just stellar.
Yeah. Unbelievable record.
The district was a finalist for the Broad Prize. Their bond rating improved. Student academic performance went up. He was even named National Superintendent of the Year.
You couldn't ask for better results, really.
Exactly. And yet, despite all that, he was fired by the school board.
Fired. It just goes to show, doesn't it?
It's a huge contradiction.
It truly is. And it highlights that simply delivering results, it's not the whole story. The source we're looking at also contrasts this with CEOs like Michael Jeffrey of LECG Corporation.
Okay, what's his story?
Well, he kept his job for 3 years, even though the company was rarely profitable. I think the stock price dropped like 80% under him.
Wow. So how did he manage that?
His secret: strong relationships, particularly with key board members.
No.
The fascinating insight here, I think, is that as long as you manage your relationships with the people who actually hold the power, performance sometimes doesn't matter nearly as much.
That really shines a light on the political landscape inside organizations, doesn't it?
Definitely.
And there's actual research backing this up. Systematic empirical research confirms that performance has what they call a statistically significant but substantively small effect on career advancement.
Right. Which basically means...
It means you can measure it, yeah, but in practical terms, it doesn't move the needle that much on your career path compared to other things. Like David Scorman's study on clerical employees.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Found only a 12% difference in the likelihood of promotion between people rated very good and those rated just good. Only 12%.
Which is tiny when you think about the effort difference.
Exactly. So this leads to a really interesting problem, maybe dilemma, what the source calls the trap of excellence.
A trap of excellence. Tell us about that.
Okay, so consider Glenda's case.
Right.
She was so incredibly good at her job, right? So effective that the senior execs just didn't want to lose her abilities in that role. They also kind of didn't see her as senior executive material, so she was effectively trapped.
Wow. Trapped by her own competence.
Right. So this raises a really important question for you, the listener. Can doing too well in your current job actually, inadvertently hold you back from getting promoted?
That's a really powerful thought to sit with. It really is.
And it ties directly into another major hurdle, doesn't it? Which is our own sort of preconceived ideas about how the world should work.
Ah, yes, the mindset issues.
The first big one is what the book calls the world is a just place illusion. This idea that many people, maybe subconsciously, conspire in their own deception.
That's so.
They prefer to believe that if they just do a good job, behave the right way, things will automatically work out, success will follow, and that people who do bad things will eventually fail.
Yeah, that deep-seated belief in fairness, it's tied to the just world effect, right?
Exactly. Explain that a bit.
Well, it's this subconscious belief we all tend to hold that basically good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, even when things are clearly random.
Right. We want the world to make sense.
Precisely. And research shows observers will psychologically kind of twist things to fit this belief. They'll attribute positive qualities to successful people and, sadly, negative ones to victims of misfortune, just to maintain that feeling that the world is fair.
So like blaming the victim?
Essentially, yes. It's a cognitive bias. And the problem is it stops us from learning from all situations and all people. Because if we've subconsciously decided someone is undeserving, maybe we're less likely to learn from their successes or failures.
And it can make you passive, right?
Yeah.
Just waiting for cosmic justice instead of taking action.
Exactly. You think, oh, they'll get what's coming to them eventually, so you don't need to, actively navigate the situation.
Right. Okay, so that's the just world fallacy. And speaking of potentially misleading ideas, let's talk about leadership books and courses.
Yes. The leadership industry.
The source really pulls no punches here. It says most of them can be hazardous to your organizational survival.
Hazardous. That's strong language. Why?
Because apparently leaders who write these books often gloss over the power plays they actually use to get to the top.
They present the idealized version.
Right. They preach about having an inner compass or being truthful or modest, when the real path they took might have looked, well, quite different.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like Jim Collins's level 5 leaders, the humble, shy ones.
Exactly. The source points out that type is actually pretty rare. And crucially, Collins's stories usually start after they became CEO.
Not how they got there.
Exactly. The journey to power often requires very different behaviors than being successful once you're already in power.
That's a key distinction. And this ties back to the post hoc rationalization idea, right?
Yeah.
We look back and make things seem logical and virtuous.
Yes. That, combined with the just world effect, means we selectively remember the positive stuff about successful people. We kind of impute virtues to them that might not even be there just because they succeeded.
It reinforces the myth.
It totally does. And it's worth remembering that study that found substantial misstatements on over 40% of resumes.
Wow.
If people aren't entirely straight about stuff you can actually check, how much more might they, embellish their character or how they behaved on the way up?
That really does challenge some fundamental assumptions, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so if performance isn't enough, and a lot of the standard advice is, well, hazardous, what does it take?
Right. Let's start laying the foundation. Let's look at the personal qualities and maybe the strategic places to start.
Good idea. And first, maybe the most important point. Personal change is absolutely possible. These qualities needed for power, they aren't necessarily innate. You're not just born with them.
That's so critical because people can feel stuck, like, oh, I'm just not that type. But the book gives examples like Ron Meyer.
Tell us about him.
He went from being a high school dropout, working as a chauffeur, to becoming the president and COO of Universal Studios.
Wow. That's quite a transformation.
It really is, and it shows that these personal qualities, they can be profoundly developed. It's not just fixed.
Okay, so what are some of these key qualities people can actually cultivate? The source mentions a few.
Yeah, things like ambition, but not just having it.
Right, like Jill Barad, the former Mattel CEO. She apparently wore a bumblebee pin.
Yeah, to remind her, and maybe others, to keep pushing for the impossible. It's about externalizing that drive, making it visible.
Interesting. Then there's energy.
Like Lyndon Johnson, who apparently worked mercilessly alongside his aides, just setting an incredible pace.
And focus. That seems key.
Definitely. Like Bruce Kozad in the drug industry or Vernon at Barclays, they talked about concentrating on that small percentage, like 5 or 10% of job duties that actually have the most leverage, not getting bogged down in everything.
Smart. What else?
Well, confidence, of course, but maybe not in the way we always think. Atusa Rubinstein, who became the youngest editor-in-chief at Hearst, she saw herself as an actress.
An actress.
Yeah, like putting on costumes and roles to project the right image for the situation. And Andy Grove at Intel, he famously said, if you act confident, you become more confident.
Fake it till you make it.
Sort of, but his point was the acting actually changes you. So the deception becomes less of a deception.
That's powerful. And underpinning all this is self-knowledge, right? Which is hard.
It is really hard. We tend to avoid negative feedback. But Joe Beneducci, a COO at Fireman's Fund, he kept a daily notebook, just reflecting on his interactions, what worked, what didn't, to be more effective next time. That kind of structured self-assessment is really valuable.
Absolutely. Okay, so you work on these qualities, but then you need to think strategically about where you start your climb, right? Where you position yourself.
Exactly. Some departments just are natural power centers. Like at AT&T, the path to CEO often went through Illinois Bell.
Or the legal department at Pacific Gas and Electric, apparently.
Right. But it's not always the obvious place. Sometimes it's about anticipating the next wave.
Being ahead of the curve, like Zia Yusuf at SAP.
Yeah, perfect example. He didn't have an engineering background, which you'd expect at a software company like SAP back then.
Right.
But he rose incredibly fast because he leveraged his expertise in partner relations. And that became critical as SAP shifted from just building software to selling it effectively through partners. He was in the right place for the changing needs.
So it wasn't the traditional power center, but it became the crucial one.
Exactly. Or think about Ann Moore at Time, Inc. She chose magazines for her career path when everyone thought cable was the future.
Going against the grain.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And she succeeded in what people saw as a dying unit, which actually made her stand out more. It helped her prospects.
So the lesson is the most powerful roles aren't always the ones with the biggest budget today. It might be anticipating tomorrow's needs or even excelling where others aren't looking.
Precisely. It requires strategic thinking about where influence is likely to grow.
Okay, let's shift gears now to actually building your power base, amplifying your reach. This involves creating resources and building powerful networks.
Right. And the first hurdle people often feel is, I don't have resources, I don't have a big budget or lots of staff.
Yeah. How can I build power with nothing?
But the source makes a great point.
Yeah.
A resource is anything people want or need. Could be money, sure, but it could also be jobs, information, connections, even just attention or support. And you can often create that from almost nothing.
How? Give us an example.
Okay, think about Michael, the summer intern at a venture fund. He was going back to school, so potentially out of sight, out of mind, right? He volunteered to coordinate the recruiting for the next batch of analysts. By doing that, he put himself right at the hub of critical communications. He gained tons of visibility and built a reputation before he even started full-time. He created a resource coordination out of initiative.
That's clever. Finding an unmet need.
Exactly. Or Klaus Schwab. He saw that global leaders needed a place to connect and exchange ideas. So he created the World Economic Forum.
Davos.
Right. He essentially established a natural monopoly for access to these really influential contacts. He created an incredibly valuable resource. The insight is, find something people need that isn't being provided and position yourself as the indispensable solution.
Okay, that makes sense. And this leads right into the crucial role of social networks, or what the book calls social capital.
Yeah, networking. It's absolutely vital, not just for finding jobs, but for actual job performance and career success, influencing salary, organizational level, all that stuff.
The example of Heidi Roizen is great here, right? Creative writing major.
Yeah, who built this hugely successful career as a software CEO in Silicon Valley, largely by being brilliant at networking. She bridged different communities, like software developers and Apple.
And it's not just about your close friends, your strong ties, is it?
No, definitely not. Yeah. Mark Granovetto's research is classic here. He showed the power of weak ties.
Acquaintances, basically.
Exactly. They're often more valuable for finding new jobs or getting novel information because they connect you to totally different circles than your close friends who probably know the same people and information you do.
So your casual connections can actually open more doors to new stuff.
Right. New opportunities, new ideas. Weak ties are better for novelty.
Okay. But a lot of people feel awkward about networking, especially about asking for help.
Oh, definitely. There's a real discomfort there. But Frank Flynn's research is fascinating. He found people significantly underestimate how often others will actually say yes if you ask them for something.
Really? We assume people will say no.
Yeah, much more often than they actually do. The key, though, is how you ask. You need to do it effectively. Often that means asking in a way that enhances the other person's self-esteem.
Like flattering them?
Well, maybe not just empty flattery. Like the example of Ishan Gupta recruiting authors for his book. He framed it as their wisdom being invaluable to India's economic development. It made them feel important and willing to contribute.
Appeal to their expertise and desire to make an impact.
Exactly. And ultimately, Networking doesn't have to take that much time. It's more about thought and planning.
Consistency.
Right, like Keith Ferrazzi's book title, Never Eat Alone, or Heidi Roizen sending out 700 holiday letters, or Ignacio creating that MBA and USA network in Argentina. These are strategic, consistent efforts to stay salient, stay visible to people who might be able to help you down the line.
Okay, so you've built the foundation, the networks. How do you make sure you're actually seen as powerful? It's about how you project yourself, right? How you show up.
Absolutely. Presentation is consequential, hugely so.
The contrast between Oliver North and Donald Kennedy during their respective hearings is really stark here.
Yeah, tell that story. It's a great illustration.
Okay, so Oliver North, during the Iran-Contra hearings, he shows up in his full ribbon-decorated Marine uniform. He takes responsibility, projects confidence, controls the narrative.
Very assertive.
Very. Then you have Donald Kennedy, the Stanford president, facing a scandal about indirect cost recovery. He appears uncomfortable, gives indirect answers, even says he's embarrassed. A much weaker impression.
On the outcomes.
North goes on to his successful political and media career. Kennedy leaves his position as president not long after. The image, the performance, arguably trumped the substance of the situations.
It shows that image really can create reality, or at least shape perception dramatically. And it's often a conscious choice.
Like Tusa Rubinstein, the editor-in-chief.
Exactly. Seeing yourself as an actress, playing roles, projecting the appropriate image, or Andy Grove pushing his shy, brilliant Intel managers to go to Wolf School to learn how to shout out an idea.
Right, that idea of acting confident to become confident.
Yes, the deception becomes less of a deception. And it extends to nonverbals too, right? Your posture, eye contact, hand gestures, avoiding fiddling with your phone in meetings that signals engagement and respect.
Little things that add up, and here's one that might surprise people. Strategically displaying emotion, particularly anger.
Yeah, that research by Larissa Tydens is counterintuitive. She found that people who express anger, not sadness, not remorse, are often perceived as more dominant, strong, competent, and smart.
Even if they're seen as less nice.
Even then.
Yeah.
In studies, people gave more status to those expressing anger, like they saw in one clip of former President Clinton during a testimony, compared to clips where he expressed sadness.
Wow. So sometimes anger signals competence.
That's what the research suggests. Now, there's debate about gender differences here, but Tydens argues forceful anger displays can work for both men and women. The core advice, maybe controversially, is if you have to choose between being liked and being seen as competent, choose competence.
That's a tough one. Okay, what about speaking powerfully?
It's about controlling the conversation, contesting premises, not just passively answering questions, using vivid, memorable language. Oliver North told his interrogators, "Let me finish." Winston Churchill. Words are the only things that last forever. Powerful stuff.
All this builds your reputation, and first impressions form incredibly quickly, don't they?
Milliseconds, apparently. And they're really durable. Because of things like attention decrement, we pay less attention after the first impression and confirmation bias. We look for evidence that confirms our initial view.
Which leads to self-fulfilling prophecies.
Exactly. How people treat you based on their impression can actually make you behave in ways that confirm it.
So managing that first impression is critical, but there's the self-promotion dilemma, right? If you brag about yourself.
Yeah, you seem less believable and less likable. The solution: get other people to sing your praises.
The strategic use of advocates.
Right. Research showed when an agent talked of a client's competence, the client seemed more competent and more likable than if they'd said the exact same things about themselves.
That makes sense. Find your champions. And maybe counterintuitively, sometimes revealing minor flaws can actually help.
Yeah, that's the Larry Summers example. Displaying minor, non-fatal flaws can sometimes strengthen commitment from your supporters. If they back you despite knowing your warts, they become more invested in that decision. A weird psychological quirk.
Fascinating. Okay, so inevitably, no matter how well you play the game, you're going to run into opposition, setbacks. Conflict is unavoidable.
Absolutely. It's part of the process. The key is how you respond, how you fight the battles.
And sometimes the best way isn't head-on confrontation.
Right. Sometimes force is met with countervailing force. The book suggests trying a little tenderness, co-opting opponents, maybe even helping them find good jobs elsewhere, like Willie Brown did with his rivals after a tough race.
Turning enemies into, if not friends, at least non-enemies.
Exactly. It can solidify your power more effectively than crushing them, which might just breed resentment. And it's crucial to avoid unnecessary battles. Don't get sidetracked.
Like Laura Esserman realizing she was wasting energy on stuff irrelevant to her main goal, the breast cancer center.
Precisely. Or Gary Loveman at Haraz saying, look, at higher levels, you just have to make critical relationships work whether you like the person or not. Stay focused on the objective.
And persistence seems absolutely key.
Oh, hugely. Richard Blum, the investment banker, said the vast majority of people give up. You have to keep pushing, like Lalit Modi's decade-long multi-front strategy to control Indian cricket. Relentless, patient effort.
And you have to be willing to use the levers of power, right?
Right.
Rewards and punishments.
Yes, people respond to incentives. The example of the board member who opposed the CEO's pay package and was quickly removed.
Ouch.
Seems tough, maybe ruthless. But the point is, your opponents will have less hesitation about rewarding their friends and punishing those who oppose them. You need to be prepared to do the same, strategically.
And making your goals seem larger than just yourself helps too, doesn't it?
Immensely. Frame your objectives as socially valuable. Opposing Laura Esserman's breast cancer center felt like turning one's back on breast cancer victims. Rudy Crew always framed his work around helping hundreds of thousands of school children. It makes it much harder for opponents to attack you without looking petty or self-interested.
Okay, so what about when setbacks do happen? Because they will.
Resilience is everything. Don't give up. Look at Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, the professor who faced that huge public scandal.
What did he do?
He fought back. He sued his university, kept doing his research, kept running his CEO conferences. He rebuilt his reputation through sheer persistence and refusing to disappear.
And telling your own story is part of that, right? Not letting others define the narrative.
Crucial. Get over the embarrassment, the tendency to retreat. Tell your side proactively.
And even when things are tough, you need to act as if you're going to prevail.
Yes. That venture capitalist, Steve, who left a struggling firm, he landed a new CEO role, partly because he never acknowledged the reversal. He projected confidence and success, even when things were uncertain. That acting as if can attract allies, funding, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Take control of the narrative.
Okay, we've covered a lot about the mechanics of power, how to build it, how to use it, how to survive conflict. But what's the cost? There's always a price, right?
Absolutely. As Milton Friedman said, there is no free lunch. And power definitely isn't free. First, there's the intense public scrutiny.
Like Rudy Cruz, or even him not bussing his own dishes, becoming public issues.
Exactly. You lose your privacy.
Yeah.
You're constantly on display, which can actually make it harder to do complex thinking or tasks that social facilitation affect.
And you lose autonomy, right, and time.
Yeah, James March, the organizational scholar, famously said you could have power or autonomy, but probably not both. Powerful people often become totally overscheduled, losing control of their own time.
And the sheer effort takes a toll.
A huge toll. On personal lives, relationships, the source notes, it can be especially demanding for women. Frances Conley, one of the first female neurosurgeons, explicitly said she chose not to have children because the career demands were just too immense.
Wow, that's a significant cost. What about trust?
That's a big one too. As you rise, people are more likely to just tell you you're right, agree with everything. You risk losing critical feedback, getting surrounded by yes men.
The echo chamber effect.
Right. And you might also be surrounded by other ambitious players, making it genuinely difficult to know who to trust. Like Ross Johnson at Nabisco, who was known for subtly maneuvering rivals out.
It sounds isolating, almost.
Can be. And finally, power itself can be addictive.
Addictive how?
Psychologically, even physically, that rush and excitement of having influence, making things happen, it makes leaving a powerful position incredibly difficult, a wrenching experience, even if it's voluntary. The loss of status, attention, it's tough.
So, given all these costs, why bother? Why engage with this stuff?
Well, because organizational politics are pretty much ubiquitous. Like one survey showed 93% of managers agree politics are common, and 89% believe successful execs must be good politicians.
It's just the reality of organizational life.
It seems to be. Hierarchy is natural. People actually tend to prefer it in groups, and that inevitably leads to competition for the limited spots higher up. So the question isn't really if you'll encounter power dynamics, it's how you choose to engage with them.
And understanding power isn't just about self-advancement, is it? It's about effectiveness.
Exactly. Influence skills are essential for getting anything done in complex organizations, especially matrixed ones, where your formal authority might not match your responsibilities.
Like Zia Yusuf at SAP again. He needed political skills to get his ideas implemented, even as an outsider.
Right. It's not just about self-interest. Used well, these skills help you navigate the system to achieve goals. maybe even making decision-making more effective, like a marketplace for ideas.
So at the end of the day, what's the final takeaway?
I think the book argues that the path to power, understanding these principles, it's available to anyone willing to learn the principles and the rules and are willing to implement them.
It's a learnable skill set.
Yes. And remember Eleanor Roosevelt's line, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. If power dynamics are always going to be there and they're vital for making an impact, well, what steps will you, the listener, take? Will you actively claim your influence and shape your own path? Or will you let circumstance and maybe misleading conventional wisdom dictate it for you?
A powerful question to end on. We hope this exploration helps you see the organizational world with maybe slightly different eyes and maybe feel more empowered to take control of your own trajectory.